Tenzin
Let us cultivate the altruistic motivation seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of liberating infinite, kind, mother sentient beings. With that kind of altruistic motivation or bodhicitta motivation, that we should all participate in this teaching.
Ani chönya ga tsu te ya da kyse ga sikin do sin tang bin na tenzin ani pento da kenwa yo cha go yore.
And as we cultivate altruistic motivation in order to listen to teaching or participate in the teaching, we must not just be thinking about just oneself alone as an individual person, nor should we be thinking just about a certain limited number of people or sentient beings, because that might involve discriminatory attitude, because we might be favoring certain number of people or beings and wishing them the best of everything. What we really need to do is think about all sentient beings across time and space, and we cultivate the motivation that I'm going to listen to this teaching so that I will be able to put the teaching into practice, and through study and practice that I'm able to find complete enlightened state, so that I will be able to help sentient beings to be free from the state of suffering, general suffering of samsara or cyclic existence, and particular sufferings of three unfortunate states of rebirth. So if we cultivate that kind of motivation and then listen to teaching, the time we spend together here, whatever the duration is, about an hour and a half or whatever the time we spend, then our listening to teaching or participating in the teaching become meaningful and purposeful. And through this kind of participation with altruism, that we are able to bring a lot of benefits to both self and other sentient beings.
and those sangarvas, any Senji turn to Sanji combat top Googles, that top of them, Mengu, you know, not the top two reversam, and this those in Tesum Shake, not Tesum Shake Yamaris, the maybe to sing a few wings.
So as we are, cultivating altruistic motivation, or what we call in Sanskrit bodhicitta motivation, as you can see, this is such a very spacious kind of motivation that thinks about all sentient beings. So what our motivation really involves is finding one's own enlightenment in order to benefit all other sentient beings. So that means we basically want to become Buddha or enlightened person so that we can bring benefits to other sentient beings. Now the next question that might arise in our mind is, can I really do that? Is that a possible thing to accomplish? And if you have certain doubt about it, or maybe, it's nice to wish for that, but I don't think I can achieve enlightenment. If you have certain doubt or, speculative mind, now let me address that issue here. I think we can do it.
I think about the total. Karisana, Ranji Yepe, Dungi, Serunki, dears.
Let me address this in a few different points. Number one, we need to recognize that whatever suffering exists in the entire universe of samsara, suffering is something that can be put to an end. Suffering is something that can be exhausted.
Doing duty, down
So how can we say that we can, stop suffering completely or put an end to suffering? That's because when we look at what brings suffering or what are the causes of suffering, then we can also see that the causes of suffering that we can abandon completely. So it's by way of abandoning causes of suffering that we are able to stop suffering. How is it possible that we can abandon causes of suffering? Because when we talk about causes of suffering, as in we say in the Four Noble Truths, truth of cause of suffering, these truth of causes of suffering are something that can be counteracted by very powerful and effective antidotes.
I remember that which never chagger. So, go now the Kadu Shumbina, and a Mimbatin Gago was 9 years, and a Kunju, Dongi, Jo Kunju, the Nimbot Kadu, Ranjuli Shavin, and Kunju the Gago.
As you may recall from last week, I gave you this example of how light or illumination and darkness cannot coexist or simultaneously. When light shines, darkness must go, must be dispelled. And when darkness exists, there is no illumination. And because illumination or light is an antidote that directly contradicts or dispels darkness. In the same way, when antidotes are cultivated in our mind, they are present in our mind, antidotes to causes of suffering, then the causes of suffering must go like darkness. They cannot coexist with the antidotes, with those antidotes. So what are the real causes of suffering that we experience? As I was explaining to you before last time also, that in our own mind we have deluded states of mind called delusions and contaminated karmic actions. These two, delusions and contaminated karmic actions, are the real causes of suffering.
So that Tigi Dungi Juta Kunju the Sage Lamtic Hakogores, the Carres, Tankagores.
So if delusions and contaminated karmic actions are the real causes of suffering, now what are the antidotes then? What are the paths that we can cultivate to get rid of them?
That the Sage Niebota Kunjum never Zoya Talaki, Tavan, Damit of Herb Chagores.
Of course, there are many different antidotes we could cultivate and to counteract delusions, but perhaps the real antidote, the most powerful antidote to abandon delusions is cultivating the wisdom, realizing selflessness.
So that the Namit of Herod Tangaranzo to some Shevet. And that Damit of Geshe with Tell Dogo Yores.
So, in regard to that, as we engage in study or listen to teaching, or whatever practice we do, all of this must be oriented towards cultivating the wisdom, realizing selflessness.
That the Inquella Caris Damit of Herod, Ranche with Tupti, the Inquella Carum Dogrosena, Tanguella Tau Coe Ranjuli Yope Coati, that needs to think about the Shego.
So what must come before we could cultivate the wisdom, realizing selflessness, if you ask? The answer to that is that first we really need to understand the suffering nature of cyclic existence or samsara in which we find ourselves in.
That the any Dajak Dumba to Ale Church Pan Domre to Domni, Nambe Church and Dom to Domni, and it got Tawa Kadak Saji Giskan on the was.
So in order to bring together some of the core principles of Dharma or Buddhism, our historical teacher Shakyamuni Buddha has said very clearly, which is popularly known in Tibetan as Tawakadaji Chagyashi, meaning the four seals of his Buddha's teaching.
No, that Tambo and Dujetanji Matapa standing about the Dujetamji, Duji Shepe, Tanjita Matapa Rescana, that Jin Latin Shoma, Tikana, Tambo Ali.
So, what are the four characteristics or the seals of Buddha's teaching, if you ask? Number one, Buddha said, all produced phenomena are impermanent. In other words, all composite phenomena are impermanent. What do we mean by composite? We mean like anything that is produced by causes and conditions, that phenomenon or those phenomena are to be understood as being transient, as being impermanent.
No, that Tigi, that's Jitani, Dujeta Maipe, that Museke, and the Koe Dube, Chu, and it. Atos Samalutan Dujeta Samalot any Taki Tembat Maris, Mataparis, Kanam.
So basically what Buddha is saying is that in general, everything that is produced by causes and conditions is impermanent, and especially produced phenomena which are associated with conjoined with samsara or cyclic existence are impermanent, which means that they do not last forever.
So that Dungar Ranita, Dungi, and the Dungi to Sum was Dungetan, Dungi could you kunju ten, 2,000 Dungi Maris, Tangiba of Melzoji, that you should go, Tangiba Kogotis.
So what we really need to understand from that statement is that, whatever suffering exists in samsara or cyclical existence, suffering is a produced phenomenon. Therefore, it cannot exist forever. It is not permanent. And nor is the causes of suffering. The causes of suffering are also impermanent because they can be counteracted by antidotes and can be abandoned. So based upon that first core principle or a seal called all produced phenomena are impermanent, we should understand that all kinds of faults that we find in samsara, the faults here also include suffering, are impermanent. So therefore, they must come to an end.
Calling into share
So through this, the Buddha is also telling us that we need to renounce samsara or cyclical existence, that we need to develop aversion to the miseries in samsara.
So that thing calling every Jumi, Ninju Tango, so that send daily Magimpa, just Chamagale, Magimpa Shinta, and those in a Kimba Tenju the take great Kanaguris.
In other words, that Buddha is telling us that we must develop aversion to, samsara altogether. We must not get attached to the marvels of this lifetime, nor should we get attached to the marvels of future lifetimes in samsara. We really need to, get fed up with samsara. If we simply put it in ordinary language, just get fed up with samsara and its suffering.
That she changes those race. That's also around you to Jan Tishu Tanda, that they make a run doing condition, doing it down. Luta assembly, doing condition, did the other doing it, do. They go never zoya, the never charge your some never something.
So that is a general explanation that I just provided. But now we need to relate that explanation to ourselves personally or individually, and that's to say that whatever problems and suffering we experience in our life, whether it is physical problem or suffering or mental problem or suffering, we should understand that suffering, is impermanent and it can be stopped. We can put an end to suffering.
Tati sakrange ngama kiwana dungeta jote seru imbe santon chane ranjuli yebe santo so tangurs marang yebe dungeta ta dungeki jo kunju nyame ba ta lech kunju nyame kunju nibote me seru imba ki rendo astamni yi chebese ati alitishen.
So what I just explained is basically that suffering in general is something that cannot last forever. It is impermanent. And so are the causes of suffering. So they are also impermanent. Now we need to apply those general principles to our own life. And so it's very important for us to understand that whatever suffering I as an individual person experiences, both mental and physical suffering, and the causes of suffering that I have within my own mind, in other words, my delusions, all of this could come to an end because all of these are impermanent phenomena. So that's what we really need to understand. So when we understand the true nature of suffering and the causes of suffering, then even if we experience certain problems or suffering in our life, we will have a better perspective on suffering, and even though we suffer, let's say physically, but mentally, we are able to stay much calmer and able to deal with, physical suffering.
아니 아니 시도 가르치는 데부터 기고 있는 데 등에 빠지면 요인나 가르치 좀 이네 그래서 참말로 아니 상주 드비 란파지 퇴지 다 용구레스다 잠비나 용구를 갖는 거예요.
In the context of mind training, especially where we do what is called Tonglen practice, the practice of taking or receiving other suffering and its causes upon oneself and giving happiness and its causes to others, which is in Tibetan called Tonglen practice, the practice of giving and taking, not give and take. And so in the, as we train our mind through such Tonglen practice, so what Tonglen practitioners really experience is, it doesn't matter in what kind of circumstances, situations they find themselves in, good or bad, they're able to withstand both good and bad situations, and they are able to use all those circumstances, good or bad, in order to help them to cultivate, the path leading to enlightenment. So they're able to transform even the bad circumstances, into favorable conditions to pursue enlightenment. So the first, seal is called all produced phenomena are impermanent. Now, as you can see, this is a very profound premise or a statement, and there's a lot to think about this. And as I just briefly explained to you, when we relate it to ourselves personally, how that really affects our way of thinking.
아니 문제가 나가 망부적인 도시네 대랑 뇌되고 연해요. 다때 도저 참말로 다이기 템바치 마레스 마타바레스 코 세지여 버체 멘르지 여버치레스 담나 땅비나 아이고 기라 셀랑 셀 편도치 뭐 기분 거 알아봤어.
So what I'm trying to get across to you is this, that in our everyday life, whatever suffering or problems we encounter or face, big or small or whatever, but if we see that, it doesn't matter, because suffering is something that does not exist forever. It comes to an end because suffering is in the nature of impermanence. So things which are impermanent do not exist, forever.
So the Tata Nayi Ranlepe Lipo Tamchi Pe Ranta, Yobaton, Puzu Tobaji Yabina. De Anita, Tahi Tembachi Mare. Anita Metabi Rangi, some do Sambi in Rana Yobati and Karzota. No. Tell Anita, Chagimi, that Tandrika Chabacham Yoros.
And also, all the good things happening in our life, we have success in what we do, prosperity, and, all kinds of good things happening in life. But if we realize that, all of these are, after all, in the nature of impermanence. So which means that these things will come to an end eventually. So if we have that kind of perspective, then we do not get, too much attached to or grasp at all the good things, happening in our life.
No. Tangaranso, Tabatani, Gemma Maranji Shebala, Nebado, Ninjung to somebody, shoot troubleshooting about the Jill Shegu.
In order for us to experience genuine aspiration seeking enlightenment, liberation and enlightenment, we must cultivate what is known as renunciation. We have to develop aversion to samsara or cyclic existence. Only then we could have genuine aspiration seeking freedom from samsara.
Renunciation 다가지 마야바신 아니 거의 쉬운 톤에 쉬운데 되다 제외 아니 제거거든 통거예요.
So when we talk about developing renunciation to samsara or cyclic existence, what do we really mean by that? Is that how would we in the first place generate that? Is that when we see what is wrong with samsara or cyclic existence, what are the limitations of samsara? What are the disadvantages of samsara, being in samsara? When we think about these things, then we develop this sense of like, I do not want to be associated with all these, limitations and what is wrong with samsara. I want to be separated from all these, samsaric things. And so that's how we develop the sense of, I want to be out of samsara. I do not want to be anymore in samsara with all those limitations and disadvantages and the faults and all of that.
Tati gozel ane janchu kesa jancho ane song to was toa ni cha marin tu su kang pen hu dangerous. So toba kibuji ta top kosan do kimbu kibuji ke yina ane ta jebo ta jemo tandi yina ya ane kande ki yina ya ane te je ne ane kang pen hu dangerous joya ke tu yor ta nyeka mugu ta tu yor ta yungu yor so kore koalen His
Holiness the Seventh Dalai Lama, Geshe Tsultim Gyeltsen, in his spiritual songs, very clearly reflected on the changing nature of things in samsara. As Geshe is quoting the whole poetry from his memory, basically he says, one should understand that even if one experiences very high status and position right now, eventually, those who are in the high status and position, they could completely fall into the low position where they might be treated upon by other beings. They might be considered like servants and slaves. So basically what he's saying is that even if one experiences a high status position right now in as a king or a queen or a minister, of any modern positions, we can add to that. But eventually all these things must come to an end. And then when the things change, it is very possible that one could now become a very low position beings or people that people might treat you like servants and slaves.
That time, Taring was on Tongomondo, Naransoke, Missin Dig Tolle, Tendi Shonsons.
I don't think we really need to look that far. Just based on our own very short life so far, what we have experienced and seen, we see that all these things happened. And I don't need to give you any names or examples. We see whole kinds of changes from high status to low status, and all these things we have witnessed.
They are the maybe charges. There is a Dunke Dentago don't get nani, don't get huge tamaka at the metona. Three orders Sani Gumaras, Sani Pe Salasai, Loma to Salasai, and Yaka, just the Nike, Chagres, says Zoo Zambuki, and a tele Chinese Yamari, don't get then Sani Meva Chag that drink metona, Rescana.
And then the seventh Dalai Lama goes on to say in his poetry that one should understand that whatever beauty and youth one has now, maybe one is at the prime of one's youth and at the greatest height of one's beauty, but they are very short-lived, like the flowers that bloom at the end of the autumn season. I think in America it's called fall. So, at the end of the season, there are some flowers bloom. Maybe they just bloom for today, and tomorrow they're dead. So this is what it is. One should not get attached to, obsessively attached to, and cling to and grasp at one's youth and beauty, because after all, these are impermanent and they don't last too long.
Me Yendas and Tuyani, so she pay Jenkins, me Yens, Tuyani, Rank Tadi was on the shores. Dragon at the pen, and the time round of it, and the Yajrema to Kayaka and Pipe and military race. That is kind of the war.
And then the seventh Dalai Lama goes on to say that one should understand that whatever resources, wealth that one has, after all, you cannot carry it with you. It has to be left behind eventually. So you should treat as if your wealth is something you have borrowed from other people. It's just like, metaphorically speaking, we have borrowed jewelry from friends and we are wearing those jewelry, but we have to give it back, return to the owners. Like that, we might have so much wealth, we are so rich, but when the life comes to an end, all these riches and wealth must go to somebody else. We cannot bring it, with ourselves. So basically, why we are going through all these things, and what the great seventh Dalai Lama is saying is that we must understand these are the disadvantages or the limitations of, being in samsara. So as we reflect on these limitations and disadvantages of samsara, then what we really need to think about is, okay, I do not want to be associated with these limitations, forever. I want to be, I want something else. I want to be out of samsara. I don't want to be associated with this samsaric, stuff. So I think that would be maybe sufficient with regard to the first core principle characterizing Buddha Dharma, or the first seal as in stamp, which is called all produced phenomena are impermanent. And the second core principle or the seal characterizing Buddha's teaching is called Sakya Tamje Tungyaba. Everything that is contaminated is in the nature of misery or suffering. So what this really basically second core principle is telling us is, what brings suffering to us? What are the causes of suffering that we must recognize and understand and get rid of those causes of suffering? Remember we said earlier, suffering arises from delusions. And delusions and both suffering impermanent, and we should counteract delusions so that they can come to an end.
That thing, Pong Chapel, that thing, Pong Chapel, Carbogus, and Annie, Della and the Tata, Lady can not get the Hebrews.
So in order to be able to counteract delusions, which are the causes of suffering, one of the things we should know about and do is, first we have to know about the law of karma. What is karma and how it functions?
And that lady Nangas is an Le Maje Patamente, Sheba Chumisagas. At that, I do see the Pandus. Ranga le Gidig le Karasabi and Te Namite, and the Rang told Jungo Mato, me yeg sabite, Namish David Rana Yungoma, Ranga Migi, that gave me le Karasamati, and then David the Yellow Mimich, Mami Paran, Rantola, to Ming Govich, Tang Sam Tongress.
So we need to understand, if you will, the theory of karma and its consequences or results. Some of the major characteristics of a law of karma or action are, if we do not create certain karmic actions, we will never experience their results. Okay, and but if we do create certain actions, then we are the ones responsible for our karmas, and we need to experience their results. We cannot expect the results of our karma to be experienced by other people, nor do we expect to experience the result of karmas that other people create, because each of us are responsible for our own karmic actions. So therefore, if we create karmic actions, we will experience their results. If we don't create them, we do not have to worry about them.
Tati Kitchemer, Ran Medepi Shomina, to me Ying Shene, Ran Yuaji, do something with the Tangiamars, the Tangi Mambu, about the Tangiamars, Rang Shepe Lady, Namiti, Ran Yuin, but think about something.
So what I'm explaining to you, it's also very important for us to understand that, usually what we think is, if things go wrong with our life, so we blame other people as if they are responsible and they messed up our life. But what we're really talking about karma is that we have individual responsibilities in terms of what karmas we create or don't create. So we experience the results of our own karmas, and we do not experience the results of other people's karma. So other people are not to be blamed for our life experiences, because our life experiences are related with or are the outcomes of our own karmic actions.
So Rana, Debo to keep a shumbi in there. The any rank lay give us sane, the Namita Rang Yungu Mato, and then me Yeji any other Tayam Tende.
So when I say that, we are responsible for our karmic actions, I mean in both positive, in terms of both positive and negative karmic actions. If things go wrong with us, we cannot blame other people, because these are the, results of our own negative actions. But if things are going well with our lives, say we are succeeding, we are prospering, these are also the results of our good karmas. It's not like other people are making a gift, to us.
Ona this I'm talking about, young, be the Tesum Sagrabos. Ona, I'll do David the Chivo, and Sanjay, now Marves, Sangdoes.
Now, one might, speculate or bring up this issue. Okay, so in that case, isn't it, don't we talk about how the good things happening in our life are through the blessings of, Buddhas?
That the Sanjay late sanity, Namiting as young women. The Garis and Naranzo lake Gavaja Sayers, Lake Gavasayati Sanjay and it tapped the Naranzo the Saya tapped Martina, Naranzo Ranto side to your maris. So the Sanjay tapped the thing. They rang in Yamslang, and they won't get to share. Share in the tea Namitaran Yunguaris.
So when we say that, the things really going well in our life, all the good things happening are through the kindness and blessings of Buddha, we do not mean it to say that, all the things happening good in our life are the results of the good karmas that Buddhas have created. Okay, because we cannot experience the results of the Buddha's karmas for ourselves. But what we really meant by that is that we on our own are not really in a position to understand about all the intricacies and the complexities of the law of karma. What is karma? What are the different kinds of karma? What are the consequences of karma? We cannot understand all of these things just on our own. So we need to rely on Buddha's teaching. So Buddha taught us about the law of karma. So that's why he presented the theories of karma. So through Buddha's teaching, we learn about the law of karma and its consequences. And not only that we learn it, now we try to follow Buddha's teaching on karma. So as we apply the teaching to ourselves, we engage in the positive actions. We don't, try to not to do the negative actions and all that. So through our own actions, good actions, that we experience, good things in life.
And then she did the Jewish of the Sanjik Devi, that non some this year. They're not doing it that the Sanjik number Jingo. They Chan Sanjik doing it on day 2, day at San Yama, that is Hizel Musibaris.
But in our mind, if you think like that, all the good things happening in our life are the gifts from Buddha, as a Buddha just, kind of give as a gift, then, by the same logic, we have to say that, like, things which go wrong in our life are the things maybe Buddha is doing it. Now, that doesn't make any sense. In the first place, Buddha cannot do it, and Buddha will never have an intention to harm anybody. So, Buddha should not be causing any harm to anybody. So that does not make really sense, theoretically. Buddha giving us suffering or Buddha giving us, some kind of happiness. It all must come from our own actions based upon Buddha's teaching.
Doing it duty and Sanjik, and then Sanjik number thing, ever his Sigmar Garnisana, and Sanjik Tamjilta, Shuri Mepa, and mighty be Potter Georgie Yoderis.
Buddha cannot be responsible for all the suffering that exists in samsara and the causes of all the suffering in samsara. Buddha could not be a creator of suffering and creator of the causes of suffering. Why? Because Buddha has infinite love and compassion. The kind of love and compassion extended equally towards all sentient beings. So how could Buddha ever think of, creating delusions and causing suffering? That's just impossible.
No, so that is that lay Mazepa the Madesh. Sheba Chimizavas. Rang less that Gedik Lake Savina, the Namit Tarana, then Jungli Gires.
So one of the major characteristics of law of karma is if we don't create karmic actions, both good and bad, then we will not experience their results. Don't need to worry about it, or don't, nothing to expect either. But another major characteristic of law of karma is that whatever karmas we have created and accumulated, they simply do not go waste. Now once we have created karmas, good or bad, we will have to experience their good and bad results.
Tayan Junge se Tangan Tinibaki, some Tang. Juru res, Junge Tai. 이미 태성이야. 재미 중에 인고 말까지는 아니 대기 담보라 아니 배냐와 시에 레지 사이는 개진이 발때 아니 배 샤돔신 매버서에 여러분.
As we debate in the monastic debate courtyards, if we have created certain negative actions which will bring suffering, but that does not mean that we will necessarily have to experience the suffering results of bad karmas. Why? Because the negative karmas can be intercepted or interrupted. Okay, let's think in terms of two different moments. In the first moment, we create a negative karma, which is sure to bring a negative result. But before it brings this result in the second moment, we, counteracted that negative karma. We intercepted it, with certain antidote. So in which case, even though we have created a negative karma, but it does not bring suffering to us because we could change that karma, or we could, counteract that karma.
Can be result comes. Must come down. I think. Carries the name of the music sentence.
So when we apply powerful antidotes to purify ourselves of negative karma, then how could those karmas bring their negative results? They cannot.
That thing is logic. Now let
me give you an example to illustrate my point. I'm going to tell you a story that is in the Buddhist literature.
Neta Sata Chopat Sam Hinkin and Savage Tavianas.
No.
Savente Nugut in Juru is Seguris.
No. So what we find an example in the Buddhist literature to illustrate the law of karma and how it brings its results is like the seeds of any grain, that have the potentiality or the potency to produce the sprouts. Like let's say we have prepared the soil. Okay, we have assembled all the necessary conditions for things to grow, and then we put some seeds of maybe rice or grain or whatever. So we have to say that these seeds have the potency or the potentiality to produce the rice seedlings or the wheat sprouts or whatever.
Takiji Tambola, the Savet Tabni, Kiji Nibala Sharok Patin, Dembang Tatani, Hintel and Savan Juru is a Yoris and Jungi Mares, Karis, Kiji Nibala Sharok Tenduguerva.
So in a general sense, we say that, if you have a good seed, that seed has the potential to produce its, sprout, and only if we put it in favorable conditions, in which case, fertile soil and so on. Now that's, let's limit the conditions here. Let's say we put a seed in the first moment in a nice soil. So we all agree that moment that, okay, this seed must produce the sprout. But before it produces sprout, let's say this seed is spotted by some bird, and a bird just comes and digs out the seed and eats it. Well, now what happens? Now that seed cannot produce its sprout, right? We can see that. Yes. So with this example, what we're trying to illustrate is, let's say we have created certain negative karmic actions. While in a general theoretical, these negative actions are sure to bring negative consequences or results. Okay, that's in the law of nature, law of karma. However, before these negative karmas bring the results, if there are certain powerful antidotes, that could counteract or intercept these negative karmas, then those negative karmas do not necessarily bring the outcomes, because they could be counteracted by powerful antidotes. So this is what we are talking about. Negative actions can be purified through the application of powerful antidotes.
That's all that Digvasani ever Yabatians, Sanjay Summers, Digvasani, Kiaj Mabakam, Kia Yabatianta, Summer, Tig Pe Corsagata, Pento Chambers and Nazo, Yamashi Ejicta, the Yoresta, Pent Yores, and Rancho, Yamashi Choversta.
We can completely trust in our historical teacher Shakyamuni Buddha's words, where Buddha himself said it very clear that if we do negative, we will have negative. If we do negative karmic actions, we will have negative results. Okay? But at the same time, Buddha also said that, negative karmas can be purified. They are purifiable. So both words of the statement of Buddha are equally true. We can create negativities which could potentially bring negative results, but before they bring their negative results, we could purify them, because negative actions are purifiable.
That's somebody, Chetan, don't get damn it, Pass. That the any that Lamdi, Tabadrea, Tabadresic, Lamdi thing, Tali Trinity, my Conrad Dubumato, Kieva James.
And then the third core principle, or the third seal, that characterizes Buddha's teaching is called all phenomena are empty and selfless. Okay, now this really reveals the true path. Okay, now I don't want to take too much time explaining each of these things. Now, I'm just simply going to highlight it here. So everything that exists, we call phenomena, are in their nature empty or selfless.
다 냥일인데 배워서 이바들이 냥일인데 배워서 제저 타바 냥디 중에다 타베 공방세 코알레 타르데 동해리 땡도 타베 타르바서 간네 타르잖아 동해리 땡도 타라와 네 레다 녀모리 땡도 타라와들 타르바스.
And then the last or the fourth core principles of Buddhist teaching, or the fourth seal, is called Nyangela Deva Shiva, state beyond suffering, because nirvana is a state of peace. So what is nirvana? What is liberation? If we ask, we are talking about liberation from, complete liberation from suffering, a kind of state where once we achieve it, we will never have to experience suffering anymore. That state is called state beyond suffering, or nirvana, or the kind of state where we are completely free from delusions and contaminated karmic action. That state is called liberation or freedom. And in that state, we experience real and eternal peace. So these are the four cardinal or the core principles which characterize Buddha's teaching, and they are called, metaphorically speaking, four seals of Dharma. Let me run through the list. All produced phenomena are impermanent. That which is contaminated is in the nature of misery or suffering. That which exists, or all phenomena in their nature, are selfless or empty. And the state beyond suffering is the state of peace.
So the Nyangel desert, Nyangde said, Nyangel desert, Nyangedi Jan, Telepan Debas, to gave it, Nyangel desert, Navana said, turn that in Gorba. Just that, to me, Nyatuta Ranjaina, Nyangel does a Yangi Carson, Nyundi Jago. That Tiba Chembeshigina, Yangit Nishi, Nyundita, Chidip Nikali, Pan Devi, gave it till time, desert.
Sanskrit term nirvana, or Pali term nibbana, which in Tibetan is translated as nyangte, which literally means state beyond distress. Now we have to go with that Tibetan word to be able to understand the concept here. What is suffering or distress we are talking about here? Because we are trying to talk about transcending distress or going beyond suffering. The nyangin, or the distress, literally translating here, according to the system of Shravakas, or solitary realizers, wait a minute, hearers and Patika Buddhas, or solitary realizers, distress or nyangin, it refers to delusions or the deluded mental obscuration. Because what these practitioners are trying to do is they go beyond the state of deluded mental obscuration. They want to get rid of delusions. Okay, so that's how they find their nirvana or moksha. Now, according to the system of Mahayana, Bodhisattva's practice, distress, going beyond distress, we have to talk about that. Distress refers to the two types of mental obscuration. Obscuration to liberation and obscuration to omniscient state. So once we abandon those two mental obscurations for good, then we have gone to the state beyond distress or nirvana. Now that's what we call enlightenment.
That's the Taranga Somalolo. Shingetole, Tensotoya, Tangaranzo Sabatole, Tangaranzo Peyak, Shinget Dusin, the shiving is that Nanjini, Yondraka, and the Tawakata Shaja Gise, that number Yondraka the rest.
So I have taken time, as I often do, before I go return to the text we are dealing with, and give you some generic, very important principles of Buddha's teaching, and this would serve as a reminder for those who already know these things and who have been coming to teachings a long time. But for those who are new, then you learn about Buddhism, the four seals of Dharma, the four cardinal principles characterizing Buddha's teaching, that which I just explained very briefly, and some I even highlighted it. I didn't get to explain. These core principles are universally accepted all over Buddhist world. It doesn't matter, what kind of Buddhism you're talking about. Every Buddhist must accept or subscribe to these four core principles. Now, going back to where we left off last week in this wonderful text called a Miscellaneous collection of Kadampa Geshe's advices. Remember, we were talking about cultivating altruism or bodhicitta, and how we should be very focused and mindful of this cultivation. But if we let distraction poke hole into our mind, then our cultivation of bodhicitta will be harmed, or it will be damaged.
Oh, yeah. I can see it, but Geshe says, even I can see, it should be keep this one. Why? Is because the energy of the eyes is losing if it without glass, That is alles. Da ne senj puga tenta ani karisa du sem rangal ani du shugre du shubena sanju sen gomba da karina ti chu geva krisheben tel never shegres kanando.
So do not let distraction poke hole into meditation or mindfulness practice. If you do that, then the devils of the delusions could sneak through that hole into our mind. And then when the devils are already in the mind, then not only will that damage our cultivation of bodhicitta, but it will damage all our other virtuous practices. Because when the devils rule, the delusions, contaminate and rule our mind, then we cannot do positive actions.
Devil said the casting a loving, but the nyomo bala do sigor mato me kanza do tan rea yomaris.
So again, I already explained this to you before, but I want to emphasize it. When we use the word devil or demon or Mara, here we're talking about the deluded states of mind. We are not talking about any living or sentient beings.
Oh, no. That can be around the same marumba shaving center, because Nangloka Semti, Peta, Miki Shol Shukchim do Levin Center, and it you can't let Kansat letter, do say anything, those Jono.
So what we're really saying here is, if we let our mind be deluded, then our mind becomes very negative. So when we have a very negative state of mind, then it is as if that we as a person have become very like a devilish. As a person, individual, we are not the devil or demon, but our mind have gone so negative, and so it is like a devil is residing in our mind or heart.
Do you cover the Sabbath? The United Lizard you do. You cover the Sabbath. Chidang did my ways. And then you are talking in a little Nanga Simke Tony, that Kansas Susu and Simke Tony, any I can't tell you.
So here, of course, demon of delusion, it doesn't matter what color we can talk about. It's yellow, red, brown, orange, whatever. Sometimes in the Buddhist literature, we talk about different colored demons. We call it the devil of death is red in color. Who cares? If the delusions in our heart, they damage, our positive actions, and that's what we should be thinking about.
So when
our mind, the point I'm trying to make here is that once our mind becomes very deluded and very negative, then, the label devil might even be applied to the person whose mind is so negative and deluded. Then we might be able to say, oh, he is such a demon or a devil.
No. That's saying Pogatan Karashan did one, Chue Nyamia. Deme Tombandose. Same new movie one, same new movie one to Sony, Chue Sheba in that listen to the Pogas case at the Gumundo. Same new movie one to Sony, Rang Chue Nyamba Ineta, the Tombandog, Tonglon Dog race.
And here the great Adisha tells us that if we let delusions control our mind, let delusions arise in our mind, then even if we think that, okay, I'm practicing Dharma, or I want to practice Dharma, but the fact of the matter is that what we do, it becomes just empty, meaningless, because mind is controlled by delusions.
Same you we want to reach post, Tamachi channels, Lama Tang, To Chabratinum, Nangeta Yimu, Shiru Mahutis. Takaji, saying you want the town, the Chue Madruba Seni, Namika Wangita, send the Shawashimake, Beta. Station send the Shagal and go conti Shavina, and then rang Lamata, and it rang the road Chudunga, draw Chudo to the Tenzul, and the same do this, that and they do give you a Mariscan.
And here Adisha is addressing his disciple. He said, "O sons of noble lineage, you should not let your gurus or lamas and friends be sad and disappointed at the time of death." Now what it's really talking about is if we let delusions pop up in our mind, and if delusions influence our way of thinking and actions, then really, even if we say we are practicing Dharma, it makes no sense. And then what happens at the time of death is that we really disappoint our gurus or lamas and our Dharma friends. And they feel so sad and disappointed, when they witness, our death.
Tesum do Mayuchis, Tesum Mayuchita, Young Rangalama the Churuka Mena, and then Jiteba and the Rangata, Sushi shows it. Sushi show any Chula Meva, young Kitanzu, any Sem Duki Jamaris, Karesana. Lucian is Sale, Danga Cheva in Sase, and a Shawate, Le Shayatane, Miguel Le Chang San, the Chevin, and it consumes Sem Yimugris, or Sem Dugres. And the consul Javashi Jamaris, and the Majestic.
And the great Adisha continues to say that, let's say, even if maybe, we don't necessarily think about disappointing our gurus and Dharma friends. Let's say maybe somebody doesn't have all of that. But you don't want to disappoint, other people who have interest in Dharma, and then doubt Dharma. The explanation given is that, one claims oneself to be a Dharma practitioner. But what the other people find, ordinary other people who are interested in Dharma, maybe they're not practicing Dharma yet, but sees you, they find that everything that you do is negative, completely contradict Dharma, but yet claim you are a Dharma practitioner. So they really get so disappointed and uninspired by one's actions, and then they must start to doubt about Dharma, and that's not good.
So that Maranzo Chue Kari, the Cheshun Kari Jubi in there. There's good number of thing about the Google.
Whatever practice we do, very small or big, I think we really have to make sure that our motivation to do the practice, small or big practice, is really pure motivation. And what Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa or Rinpoche has said elsewhere, I think it really, completely agrees with what we're talking about here by Atisha. And as Geshe quoted the lines from his memory, Rinpoche said, if your mind is positive and noble, you will have positive and noble paths and grounds. But if your mind is negative, then you will be on negative path and negative grounds. So everything depends on the mind. So that's what we're talking about, the need to train our mind. So all of us, who are interested and who are practicing Dharma, we need to look within our own state of mind and reflect on our own state of mind and find out whether we have generated any negative thought to harm other sentient beings or people, and whether we are carrying out that negative state of mind through actions of body and speech. Are we physically harming someone? Are we saying something nasty or hurtful things to others? But if we realize that we are doing those things, we must try to stop right away. The negative way of thinking, the negative physical action, the negative verbal action. On the other hand, if we realize that we are thinking positively and we are helping and benefiting others, well, then we have good reasons to rejoice in our own positive actions. So it seems like everybody looks seems like maybe it's hot temperature down there. Geshe says he can see the perspiration on a lot of people. So maybe we'll stop there today.
Shining by sweat.
I think your sweats and the dewdrops are shining.
Okay, that. Drink on Hubert and Janin Tomangaran Tomaloke, Sally Yabuya, and Consum Batik, Lani Casino shit to be shagged. So whatever I have explained today, all of us should keep those things in our mind and do our best to put it into practice. And I have some requests to make here. Two people have passed away. Their names are Margaret Gavlik, died at the age of 92. Tin Tam died in the last month at the age of 41. And then someone also requested that, of course, we see the terrible, crisis in the Middle East, and a lot of innocent people are being killed in Lebanon and also in Israel. So we really want to think about all those who have lost their lives in this way. And Robert Woodley is critically ill after the surgery, so prayer has been requested for him as well. No. That indeed, that Mambo was some Samalota. Doing about some that indeed pay when you saw La Shorney to soon at done then as a chamber child and Kanji that never chamber you can learn in charge that day, some you can share. So Zangaran Tamaloka and Tenzo any Karasavita. Tonke Tenzo any Shava Yabuki Leata, Che the Theatre, at the Digger Manasan Tongris. And then done another with Tenzo and then Nelly Tony, and they treat Nangar shower, the treat them cinnamon, Nangar shower duel, and Pajima but Tenisan Tongris.
As you can see that the request that we receive, for prayers is, for people who have lost their lives or who are very ill. And so this all shows about the samsaric nature and the kind of situations we find ourselves in. So we want to think about all of them, the names, that we know and those we don't know. But we wish those who have lost their lives to find good rebirths. And then after finding good rebirths, may they, be able to do positive actions and pursue, positive goals. And those who are very ill, we pray that may they be able to recover from their sicknesses very quickly. And after regaining good health, may they develop interest in positive thinking and doing positive actions.
Shinkenta, and then Nankin, Sankin, Samalo, Naransuta, Munisig, Naransuta, Pama Pinja Chadigaris, Muranso Pay, Dawachimbo Chad Samalo, Chadigar, so that Mitubi never to the Hiata, Tinjil Sutada, maybe you some Congress.
And beings, who have died and who are very sick, from another perspective, they have been our kind parents and best friends. So they have connection with us as well, or we have connection with them. So we want to send our best prayers for them so that they're able to find good rebirths, good health, and so they're able to pursue, good actions in their lives.
Yeah. Shadow College, Jabotom, Shadow Gabazon, Besanjo, Subacherizano, shall say to Omani Maran Samala, any link to the church in gave us all Latini, Sanji Temperum, because I should never hear. Nani, Javi, within the shape of Taman, Jakuza, Tema, the two Jiggins, and Bimil to you like you. Ani Gindubana Jepes, and Treasure Show, Puman, Chundi, Shawana, and Rupata. Any Garzota. Ani Gitinji come to the Yendo, Mintibico sort of the Henny, Tunjin the sort of them, maybe to do you.
We have come together this morning to participate in the Dharma teachings, and whatever merit that we have accumulated together, we dedicate it for the flourishing of Dharma, the source of benefits and happiness throughout the universe. May His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all other great holy masters live long and be successful in fulfilling their visions benefiting sentient beings. May spiritual communities throughout the world and spiritual practitioners from all traditions remain healthy, harmonious, and be successful in fulfilling their spiritual aspirations. May these and other world environments be free of all kinds of unwanted pains and problems, wars and destructions, famines and diseases, and may sentient beings find peace, happiness, prosperity, and spirituality. In short, we dedicate our merit for all kind mother sentient beings to be free from the fears and dangers of two types of mental obscuration, and may we all reach complete enlightened state quickly.
Honest.